And also, do you have the conducive work environment that allows you to have work-life balance, or is it going to be seen as a negative?
I'm Jay Ack,
And I'm Shaw Core.
and this week on Conversations with the Creator, we have an educator, author, mental health advocate, producer, and creator of the Balanced Boundaries and Breaks framework, Evan Whitehead.
Man, you made me sound important.
You are, brother. You are.
Man, I appreciate it. I appreciate the intro, most definitely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So 25 years in education, you would say 25 plus?
Yeah, 25 plus. Yeah, 20, 20, almost close to 30. Over 4 decades. I started in 1997, so I've been at it for a while, and I fortunate enough to have and play pretty much every role in a school system and school district except for superintendent. I actually started as a teacher's aide and a paraprofessional and just worked my way up through the system. Um, I didn't have plans to be an educator when I was originally coming out of high school and doing that thing. It just is one of those things. Like most of the things in my life, it kind of fell into my lap. And I would tell you, I was a former athlete. Aside from sports, when I got into education and working with kids, it was the first thing that felt natural and came pretty easy to me right away. And I just kind of had a niche. I would always consider myself a non-traditional teacher, an educator, and I think it has helped me to be able to connect with different kids from all diverse backgrounds, families, etc. Because I didn't have a traditional route. I wasn't the kid in the classroom that was always getting straight A's and doing all the things that most people think those that become teachers are. I was always had an aptitude, that was pretty high, but I didn't feel the need and purpose to necessarily apply, until I needed something, then I would be able to turn it off and on. So I didn't have a lot of those study habits that were necessary, that's part of the education process. So when I did get in, I felt, I can now kind of give young people some advice and help them kind of move through and doing so as well. So someone tapped me one day and said, "Hey, you ever thought about being a teacher?" After I was working in as a paraprofessional, because they would pretty much give me the opportunity to teach anyway, but kind of under their guidance. So I decided to go back and get my undergrad in special education. And then I majored in special education with a concentration of bilingual, bicultural special education and teaching English as a second language and also Spanish language and literature. And then went back teaching for a while. And then I got into a great school district with some really good people, really great superintendent that really believed in providing leadership opportunities prior to actually having a line administrator like title role, but provide you opportunity to coordinate things and create, come up with projects. And it's kind of where I cut my teeth and was really supportive. And next thing they said, "Hey, you ever thought about being in administration?" I was like, "No, I'm cool. I don't want to go that route."
Right.
But what I learned is that if you're not there, you don't have a seat at the table. You may be on the menu. So that's what really got me into leadership because I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to be able to sit at the people that were that were the decision makers, the people that had influence on working with, specifically, low income students of color, families of color, diverse student backgrounds, and helping them to achieve and have the opportunities to be successful as well. And also for, special needs populations, and diverse learners. So that's kind of what I said, "Hey, this may not be bad because maybe I can kind of give my 2 cents and kind of give a different perspective." So I went in and got my got my master's in education, leadership, and administration. And the way that the world and universe operates, literally the year that I finished my master's degree, I was like, great, usually the next role is going to be like an assistant principal because I'd already been a dean of students and kind of doing the discipline route. I was a community outreach coordinator. So the next role would be like an assistant principal. Literally the year that I graduated, the district had hired 4 assistant principals. So now I got my degree, I'm ready to go. They told me to go get it. And then it was like, yeah, we just hired 4. And they were like, you can wait, we always, people always leave and opportunities because my district was great about creating leaders and building them up. So people always got other opportunities. But I was like, man, I just put this work in, I'm working full time, going to school, with a master's degree, my family at the time was young. And I'm like, man, I really wanted to put it to use. So I decided I'm gonna go outside of my district and look for some opportunities. I really bet on myself. At the time I was 34 years old and still relatively young in the leadership space. But I had a lot of experience under my belt. It wasn't formal, but it was a lot of informal experience that I was able to utilize, and I felt that I had a lot to bring to leadership space. So I just started filling applications for like assistant principal jobs, et cetera. And then I saw something come up and it wasn't assistant principal job, but it was something that kind of fit because I was always in like the counseling, kind of the school counseling, kind of the special ed, all the kind of affective domain pieces of education. And that was kind of my niche and my lane. So I saw something and it was, a district level position and it was, overseeing special services, which at that time, it included like special education, bilingual education, director of bilingual education, also overseeing early childhood education. So McKinney mental homeless liaison, over and supervising like the guidance counselors, social workers, all the related service staff, speech language pathologists, et cetera. And I was like, hey, maybe I'll try it. I'd worked in a large high school district. So each high school district had about 2,500 students. So I saw an elementary school district. I never worked in elementary and they had about 5 or 6,000 entire district. I said, oh, sounds manageable. I can do it. Threw my hat in the ring, went on an interview, and I actually was interviewing with the superintendent one on one, and she was stoic. I couldn't read her at all. It was the toughest interview I had ever had. And I left that interview and I came home at the time, and my wife at the time said, "How'd it go?" I said, "I bombed. I didn't do well at all." And it was surprising because I always, did well in interviews. And I didn't feel I did well at all. And I couldn't get anything, no read at all. And I said, I don't think I'll be getting a call back at all. And literally about an hour later, my phone rings and she said, thanks for interviewing. I appreciate it. I'd like to bring you back to have a second interview with some members of our staff and Board of Education if you willing to do that. So I went back and sat across from some board members and some teachers and administrators in the district. And, the way it ended up working out, I got hired as this, and my role was assistant superintendent for the school district. And so at 34, I was the youngest assistant superintendent in the state of Illinois at the time. I got in this game really early, cut my teeth. I had a great mentor at the time, and as a person, especially a male Black educator, to have a mentor, as a Black woman that had been in the district for some time. She actually ushered me in because the superintendent, was previously the assistant superintendent, so I was replacing her, and she taught me everything that I needed to know in terms of operations management, how to, in terms of community relations, how to work with school boards, and kind of just threw me in, feet first. And literally, I probably started working like 12-hour days because she was side by side working with me to make sure that I was going to be successful. And everything that I learned from her helped me throughout the rest of my career to this day. And I can't thank her enough, when she passed and, we went back and, hadn't worked in the district in a while, went to her funeral to see everybody. And she really touched everybody because she cared. And I said, she cared about me. She took a chance on a 34-year-old, African-American, green administrator who had never worked in district office and sat me in the seat, right next to her, and taught me a lot. So, I'm always forever thankful for her as well. And so I was in senior leadership for, gosh, the last 16 years. Most recently, I was an executive director of a therapeutic day school startup for students with autism and intellectual disabilities, which is a great experience. It was a for-profit school, but it taught me a lot about that specific special ed population, and also the ins and outs of operations of starting a school from the ground up. So it's another experience that I had as well. And then, with my experience, I started, speaking and doing consulting work, and realized I had a lot to offer and I could scale. I just didn't have to stay where I was, and start helping a lot of folks and making sure that young people, regardless of background, had access and opportunities, and their families began to understand and be educated on the school, public school system in the United States.
How did a career in education kind of lead you to creating something bigger than the classroom, and mainly, alluding to your 3 Bs framework?
Well, yeah, I thank you for asking me that. It was really organic, right? And it was really by it was not something that was planned out. So as I told you, I'd always worked in the like the affective domain. So in schools, we don't call it mental health, we call it social emotional learning, right? It's the same thing. But that's always kind of been my niche. And even when I was in the classroom teaching and I was teaching exceptional learners, I taught what they used to call like EDBD, like emotional disabilities and behavior disorders. They no longer call it that, but that's the population I work with. And I specifically worked in high schools. So I taught high school kids that had, and the one thing I noticed was, and I realized is that intellectually they're very, very bright.
Yeah.
But because of their emotions and when they become dysregulated, right, it would impact their schooling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it was never the academic component. It was always the other stuff, right? That they got going on. And that's what I excelled at. So when it was kind of like the thing I was always into anyway. And then life happened, in terms of my 3 Bs, as I told you, I started, I started later in my profession, but when I finished, I was still young in terms of my role, right? Um, and with that role, me being naive, I did not know um, how much work and how labor intensive the job of an assistant superintendent is, right? Because you are overseeing department or departments of a school district, but also, the district office is always like 6 months to a year ahead of everybody else. So, my superintendent that I told you about, my mentor, she said, Evan, you know, because people would say, oh, you guys are over there, you got a nice office, and you come in and come in a little after we do, and you guys are eating lunch and all these things. And she said, Evan, she said, if they think that is the case, we are doing our job, because she said we have to make it look like we're not stressed, because if we're stressed, they're going to be stressed.
Oh, wow. Good
So,
point.
so she said, our job is to make it look like we're not doing anything. She said, so that's a compliment, because we make sure that the schools run like they're supposed to, that their budget's in place, that they have the resources they're supposed to get. All the things that they take for granted, as you were talking about earlier, they don't realize that if we don't do our job, they can't do theirs. So she said, that's, take that under consideration. Now, that being said, as I told you, I started 10, 12-hour days, that became um, my life in terms of my profession, working in district office, and I also always shared a wall with the superintendent. So I was always involved in a lot of things behind the scenes and, a lot of work. And, because of that, I went through a situation in that, I went through a really, really tough mental health crisis, what some people may call burnout now, or, being able to have a breakdown. That's what happened to me. I was literally just going, and I was trying to do everything. I was, I said I had a young family, I had 2 kids who were both under the age of 5. At the time, when I was married to my wife, she was a stay-at-home mom, so I was the sole breadwinner. Also I was running school districts, and I'm taking care of like thousands of other children, during that. And, I didn't have the sustainable coping skills and mechanisms to sustain that level of work.
Mm.
Right. All I knew was just push through, head down, don't do it. But then the coping skills that I had were not sustainable. I don't use the term healthy and unhealthy because that's subjective, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
something could feel good and it may work, but it may not work for a long time to be sustainable. So I had, coping skills that weren't sustainable, alcohol, substance use, also just the fact of like not getting proper sleep and rest, not eating properly, all the things. And they just kind of came to a head at one point in time, and I just crashed. Literally, like everything shut down, mind, body, the whole thing. And I had to end up going through hospitalization through that. And so I had to enter a program for mental illness and also for substance use disorder. So it was dual diagnosis. And I will tell you, even though it may sound like, wow, what have you, like it was tough. Yeah, it was because, I was going through all the things like compassion fatigue, secondary PTSD, because I'm working with the highest need population. I'm doing stuff for everybody else, and I'm trying, and also I'm a recovering people pleaser. So in my career, I was always trying to, please everybody. And so I landed there, and I will tell you that was the best thing that could have happened to me because I finally had a chance to rest.
Wow.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a pause. And yeah, it was scary, right? And going in there and entering and doing all the things, but I realized I had never paused in my life. I was
Yeah.
always looking for what's next,
Yeah.
right? What's next? What's next? What's next? And when I got there, I was forced to, right?
Yeah.
The universe and higher power said, "Oh, you don't want to listen? I got you. I'm gonna make you
I'm gonna
listen.
sit you down.
I'm gonna sit you down." And I was sat down. So I entered a program. It was a partial hospitalization program. I was there for a little over 20 days, about 4 weeks, a month. And then I was in the intensive outpatient program after that. And I was on FMLA. And this is how much I was grinding in my profession.
Yeah.
So at my job I was at the time, I was working there for, gosh, almost 5 years. I had enough vacation and sick time that I was off of work for FMLA for little over 3 months, and I didn't miss a paycheck.
Wow. Man, you
I'm gonna say
needed
that again
that.
so your listeners
Yeah.
hear that. So
Nah.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe they can
Say
do the
that one
math.
more time.
But I'm
Yeah.
gonna say it slow.
Mm.
I had been working at my job for almost 5 years, and at a district level. I went on FMLA due to my mental health crisis. I was out on FMLA from middle of August through Halloween, give or take. And I had enough sick time, vacation, PTO, whatever you want to call it, that I did not miss a paycheck during that time.
Which
That's how much I neglected
I was just about
my
to
own
say.
self-care
Yeah.
and
You was
well-being,
letting all that
right?
sick time stock up.
It was
Mhm.
stocking up,
And
right?
yeah.
It was stock because I would tell you in many professions, right? There's a culture or of like martyrdom, or there's a contest to see like, you know, how long can you stay at work? Well, why did you leave so early? Right? All these silly things that people buy into, and I bought into it. And it was to my detriment because I thought if you demonstrate how hard you work, you come in early, you stay late, right? You're going to show your value, right? And people are going to see it. And yes, they do, but also they ask more of you as well. And so, you know, when I was in my program, that's when I started to reflect. I started to think. I started to learn about things about myself. You know, all these things that I had buried in my life, unresolved trauma, not having, sustainable coping mechanisms and coping skills, understanding like the why behind my behaviors.
Yeah.
And as I was doing that, that's when I came up with my 3 Bs, because I would, whether it was in my individual, one-on-one with my primary therapist, whether it was in group therapy, whether I was learning skills, whether I was with my prescriber, these 3 themes kept coming up every time. The first theme was balance, right? And I was like, man, I kept hearing it, and I'm like, you know what? Like, we always talk about this in a profession, like work-life balance, but like, I don't think anybody ever tells you how to do it,
Yeah.
right? Right? They preach it, but they don't tell you
What does
how
it
to.
look like in
What does it look
plain
like,
terms?
right?
Yeah.
And also, do you have the conducive work environment that allows you to have work-life balance, or is it going to be seen as a negative? So that was the first thing, was balance. I'm like, man, it came like a light bulb. Like, man, I never had it, but I was always trying to get it. The next one was boundaries, and I was like, boundaries. So I always knew about, like, respecting others, right? Other people's boundaries. But what I learned was I wasn't good about implementing and sustaining and standing on my own boundaries. Like I said, I'm a recovering people pleaser.
I caught
I want
that.
to make sure
I caught
everybody's
that
happy,
term.
right? Right. I'm gonna do it. I want to do
Yeah.
things for everybody, make sure everybody's good. You ask me for something. Hey, can you volunteer for this? Can you be a sponsor for this? Can you stay late for this? And it was professionally and personally, because I didn't understand the word no.
Yeah.
Right. And I would feel guilty and let people guilt me out of things, which is emotional manipulation, right? At times, whether it's family, friends, people you work with, what have you. But I fell into that trap. And I realized, I'm like, man, had I at some point in time had the power and realized the power I had to say no, I could control
Yeah.
what people, right? Because we teach people how to treat
How to
us,
treat us, right?
right? So
And
that
people
was that.
people know
Yeah,
who they can go to
right.
get
Yeah,
what they want.
yeah.
Yeah.
They and someone told me one time, they said, the first time you do something for somebody, it's a favor. The next time it's expected.
Ooh. Wow.
And so I was like, man, I was like, well, I never implemented my own boundaries. I was always looking out for everybody else. I was trying to be everything for everybody. And then the last one was breaks. It was like, because, I would hear things about self-care, right? Take care of yourself, take time for yourself, all these things. And I never did it. Like, I gave you a prime example. I wasn't going on vacations. I wasn't taking sick time, right? All the things that are necessary, because your mental health impacts your physical health. And I was here and I'm like, man, my whole life was always what's next, trying to move to what's next. It's learned behavior, right? Your condition, especially in the Western world, in the United States, right? Everything's microwave society. We don't slow down. In some regions, like where you all live, right? Slowing down is different than in the Midwest, right? Like, but as a country and a society, we're still on the hamster wheel a lot. You know what I'm saying? And we never take the time. We never take the time to pause. And I learned the importance of the pause,
Yeah.
because the first time in my life I was taught meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, you got to sit on the floor with your legs
Right.
crossed
Right.
and all these type of things.
Right.
But I learned that's not it. And
Yeah.
mindfulness really was what opened my eyes and taught me how to pause, how to breathe, right? Because as you know, when you move fast, right, oftentimes you're not breathing. And when you don't, right, and when you're doing all of that and you're tense or you're anxious, right, you're suffocating yourself. And then when you learn to pause, you can exhale and you breathe. So that's those 3 things kept coming up, and I'm like, balance, boundaries, breaks, and it was literally like a higher power was talking to me, and it was like, and it just came out one day. I was in a group therapy session, and I said, "That's balance, boundaries, and breaks." And the therapist was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, that's my thing. I said, I figured out why I'm here and what I need to do to change. And they're like, tell me about it. And so I did it. And I was about halfway through the program. And then for the second half of the program, every time I was in it, I would see like opportunities where that's balance, that's boundaries, that's breaks. And then they would look at me and say, Evan, what are you going to say? I ended up facilitating a lot of the things because I was saying things and the way that I was speaking, articulating it, it was so basic that people could understand it. And they were like, wow. So that's how it happened. And literally I was on the last, I journaled the whole time I was there. They would ask me, what are you doing? I said, I'm just journaling. It was therapeutic. I didn't know that what it was going to lead to. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just journaling. And then I got to the end of my program. I said, I'm gonna write a book. And they're like, really? I said, yep, I'm gonna write a book on my 3 Bs. And I said, I don't ever want anybody to have to go through what I did.
Wow.
And understand the burnout. And it's burnout from your profession or your personal life. And I vowed, I said, I don't ever, if I can reach one person that'll hear my 3 Bs, I feel I've done something. And I graduated, I left, and they said, good luck on your book. And I said, I got you. And then, it ended up slowly while I was on FMLA. I started on social media because I was never on social media. I was on, what we now call X, was Twitter at the time. A lot of educators were on there. And one day, a colleague's like, you should get on, Twitter and social media while you're off work. There's a lot of people in the educator space. I got on, and I think, within a week, I was engaging with people, and came up with my hashtag, and probably within a month, I was on my first podcast.
Wow.
And literally the ball kept rolling, the algorithm did, and then it snowballed, and it wasn't me. It was really the universe and higher power, that put it within me, because I could have never done it. Like I said, it was not planned. I don't know anything about social media. I didn't know anything about podcasts. I was literally just speaking like I'm talking to you off, like being very transparent and being vulnerable and telling my story. And it resonated with
It
people.
resonates, man.
It resonated. And it was first with educators, and then it went from educators to like mental health professionals. Then it was law enforcement. Then it was first responders. Then it was, CEOs of companies, business. And I was like, wait a minute, I may have something here. And I just kept talking about it. And, it just came to how it is. And I really have never really put like a social media marketing machine behind it. It's just been very organic.
Yeah.
And, I like the way in which it grew, because my goal was always like, hey, if I can reach some people, great. And I always said, man, I said, if I can get somebody like that has a reach, whether it's an athlete, entertainer, I think they would need it too. Cause I know if my life is like that, I only know what theirs is. And it was very ironic. So, I know like how you all are, but I usually just either Google myself or my stuff just to kind of see where my digital footprint is.
Yeah.
And it was probably 2023 probably. And I saw all this like 3 Bs, balance, breaks, and boundaries, balance, boundaries, and breaks. I'm like, what? I looked, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I clicked on the link, and it was Oprah Winfrey had produced a YouTube series called Recipe for Change. And it was particularly women of color, entertainers, athletes, politicians, all notable faces. And they would talk about their lives and like how they've overcome things and obstacles. And there was a segment, it was hosted by Mary J. Blige. In one of the segments, they were there was this beautiful mansion. I'm assuming it was in California, looked like it. And these women were sitting at the table. It was like Kelly Rowland, it was Sweetie, it was the former mayor of Atlanta, it was some other like notable people. And Sweetie started talking, and she was like, yeah, I've had some mental health challenges, and there's something that really helped me, and it's the 3 Bs: balance, breaks, and boundaries. My mouth dropped.
What?
My mouth dropped, brother. I'm telling you, my mouth dry, and I said, and I had to rewind. I said, wait a minute. And I listened to the whole thing, and it was like word for word the things I had been talking about.
Wow.
And that's, why I'm a believer in many things. I'm a spiritual person, and I also know things can be manifested. You know what I'm saying? When you put good energy out there, and you never know how it's going to happen, but it can happen. I didn't plan on it, and that's how I ended up reaching that. And then Sweetie would do interviews. So People Magazine, Vibe, and she's talking about the 3 Bs: balance, breaks, and boundaries. That's how my reach ended. So when I heard that, then I felt validated, like I got something. And yeah, and the rest is kind of history, and that's really, where the mindfulness came in. And because, once I started my recovery and I was clean and sober, and I started doing mindfulness practices, I started going outside and just being outside. And for the first time in 20 something years, I actually heard birds chirping. I saw colors.
Yes. Wow.
And everything opened up because my mind was clear.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I had not only, detoxed my body, but my mind.
Yeah.
And I was thinking differently, and I was taking the time out. Like you said, I was walking through the neighborhood versus driving a car through the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't even notice this.
Yeah.
Everything was so vibrant. And since then, it's been that way. But understanding, like, it's important to just sometimes just breathe and be, and the whole part of like radical acceptance. Control what you can control. Don't try to control stuff you can't control, because it's not within your power to do so. And really, it's really with that, as my 3 Bs are a combination of a lot of different types of therapies and things, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. Also, I incorporate social emotional learning competencies, and then obviously with the mindfulness, incorporating that as well into it. And it kind of all comes together because it's aligned and it made sense. And so, I'm very grateful, that, by the grace of God, I'm still here,
Yeah.
and I'm able to share my message because I knew there's something bigger for me. Right. And I had to go through that. And I would tell you, not only did my 3B save my life that time, but, also through my recovery, because as a timeline, when everything happened, it was 2019. So I was on FMLA from August to October, the end of October. I go back to work in November. Then we have a winter break.
And then COVID.
And then you know what happens. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And so as I tell my story, it reminded me as I'm going, I'm like, this is nothing but higher power preparing me for what was supposed to come, right?
Yeah.
Because what happened in COVID, everybody had to sit down.
Yeah. Everybody.
What happened to COVID, everybody was isolated.
Yeah.
What happened to COVID, you weren't going into work. You had to find ways. And statistically speaking, I was still very vulnerable in my recovery. You're talking 4 months. So I could have easily relapsed with everything that was going on, like all the risk factors to relapse, right? I was at home, right? I didn't have to, my schedule was more lax. I was just there. I should have relapsed, right? I should have, but I didn't, because I had already worked on so many things, right? I was prepared to do so, and I didn't even know what was coming, and there's been other, situations in my life, where I know, like, I recently, went through a divorce the last couple years. And you know what? Like, I could have easily, said, you know what, the heck with it, and use some non-sustainable coping skills because it's tough, but I didn't, I kept my focus on my sobriety, which I would have made a promise to myself that I would never let anything or anyone come between that, because when I surrendered, I said, I'm not going to allow anything outside factors, no matter what.
That's beautiful.
And I stayed that and then went on my 3 Bs. And, I didn't relapse. So I still been, clean, sober, and moving forward, and just keeping, the main thing. And, just making sure that I'm also living
Yeah.
what I'm talking about as well.
Yeah. I would add a fourth B,
What's
move,
that?
believe. Just
Yes, sir.
continue
Oh,
to
man.
believe.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, bro.
Yep. 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 Most definitely.
Yeah.
Nice.
Most definitely.
And speaking of bees, being that, this is Conversations with the Creator, we like to focus on knowing what our guests have created.
Mhm.
Now, are you contributing to other manuscripts or literary endeavors as well? Like, was the three B's where you stopped, or were there some other things that you kind of like put your pen to?
Yeah. So it's interesting that like the sequence is what kind of is in reverse. So what happened was I actually started because started writing because people were asking me to be either a co-author or contributing author on projects that they were already working on. And so I got brought on. So my first experience as an author was actually as a contributing or co-author on 3 other books, but I embedded the 3B's work within it because it was a great opportunity. And so I had actually put my 3B's kind of on pause and of like kind of just writing it because I'm a person about like feeling and energy,
Yeah.
and I got to feel it, and, I actually, what ended up happening is I kind of put it on the back burner, still kind of taking notes here and there. And then last year, I'm like, you know what, Evan, just go ahead and finish this manuscript of the 3B's because you need to do it. And so that's what I did last summer through the fall. I completed it, manuscript. And so now I am, vetting it through different literary agents and determining about how I want to go about publishing. Obviously I have a lot of interest. But what I'm weighing out now is like, I want to make sure that it continues to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like to use the term brand, but it is me, right? I
Mhm.
want it to still have the authenticity of it being for everybody, right? I don't want to talk over people's heads. I want to meet people where they're at. I want it to be for the people, for the community, right? I want people to be able to access it, from whatever your profession, education level, whatever it is. And so that's where I am now with that.
In 2020, you were like top 50 culture builders.
And it was organic, man. Like I said, like I didn't know, I didn't understand anything. I was just being myself and authentic. And someone told me that's being vulnerable and authentic is really what people miss when
Yes.
trying to build a brand,
Yes.
right? Like that's what they miss. They think that they have to, everything has to be perfect. That's to
Polished.
put on and
Yeah.
polished.
Yeah.
But they're like, people forget like the common person is 95% of the people that are out there,
Yeah.
and they're not polished all the time.
Right.
Right. And so, if you're able to do that, people connect with you and it resonates with them. And so, yes, I understand now, technically it is a brand. And I shied away from it a little bit, but understanding, it is a brand because the brand is me. Right. And it only goes as far as I am able to push it, but also, who I am, right? I am the billboard, I am the person that is living it, showing, because that's how it was created, right? It was created through my lived experience. So I always have to make sure that I'm always living my truth as best as I can. And then if we all make mistakes. If not, I take full accountability, to make sure that I'm also showing that human side, right?
Yeah.
Of the fact, because unless you're Christ, right? we all
We
fall
all fall
short.
short.
We
Yeah.
all fall short,
Yep.
at some point in time. But I think, being able to show people, and that's why, at times when I do speak, and I tell my story, by first glance, people don't also realize I'm also a recovering addict, right?
Right.
I'm an alcoholic addict,
Right.
right? And all the things I go through. And then when I say that, right, now it has so much more depth.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
has so much more power
Power
behind
to
it,
it. Yeah. Because
right?
you're living
Because
this
that
out
is
in real
like,
time.
I don't look like the stereotypical,
Yeah.
drug addict, but I am just like everyone else. And I'm one drink I'm one, ingestion of something away from being, back where I was, or like anybody else that suffers from the disease of addiction.
Yeah.
That is homeless and out there. I'm no better than anybody else. I just in a space now. Thank God that I'm not active in my addiction.
So do you think about yourself as a creator now? Like when
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
doing things? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, because I think I realized it when folks like yourself were starting to ask me to come on a podcast or speak. I'm like, I guess I kind of am a creator, because people are asking me to do things. And I had a friend of mine that I was talking probably early on, when I was really starting to create content and people were starting to gravitate to it. And I was talking about like the people that I was connecting with that were in the education profession that, are really successful and really big names. And I said, wow, I can't believe like I'm meeting them. And they said, Evan, you need to pause. You are one of them now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are an influencer
Yeah.
in your own right.
Yeah.
And once again, that was my lack of self-awareness,
Yeah.
because I'm still not seeing myself that way.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah,
I
bro.
guess you're right.
You're a creator of hope, bro.
Yeah, I try to be. That's one of my hashtags is dope addict to hope
Hope
addict.
addict. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
So I checked out your Facebook profile because we really didn't touch on this in the request form, but you're listed as a producer for a
yeah.
production company, Bella and L
Yep,
Media, and they're
yep.
actually here in Florida, right?
Yep, they are. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, Bella L Media, the founder and executive CEO is Charles Maddox. He's a friend of mine, the good friend of mine that I met, right around the time, I was starting, become a creator, and he's become a great friend of mine. He is an actor. He is, award winning. He is also a musician. He's just an artist. He's a really great brother. But his passion is to help people, and really in the area of health and wellness. And he, like other folks, he saw my three B's: balance, boundaries, and breaks, and he was creating, and he was at the time he was working on and developing a show on mental health and well-being. And all of his content, all of our content is always reality based. And so he had this idea, and he was like, man, I think you'd be great to come on and support the folks that are there, to talk about, your experience and be a true like peer coach with them. And so that's how we connected. And then we started working more. And then I got a lot more involved. I learned the process of television and film and all the behind the scenes that that I didn't know, because I'm an educator. That is not my world. But I also learned the power of media when it's used the way that it can be used.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of content, and so now you can see all of our content on Revoke, RAVOKE. That's kind of our hub. So all of our shows, specials, movies are on there. We have everything from movies, and specials on CRP, and we have things on diabetes, and our most recent series is on menopause. It was just released about 2 months ago, back in February, and it's really going really, really well. And people ask, well, what do men know about menopause? And the thing that it is, we realize that menopause affects everybody, because if you have a mother, if you have a sister, if you have a significant other, right, and they're gonna go through menopause,
Yeah.
and you're gonna experience and be on that ride along with them. So you better educate yourself,
Yeah.
right? So you can support your loved one in some way. And it's one of those things that, as I was being educated on it, it really opened my eyes, because the reality is that it's one of those things that um, doctors just minimize, and even other folks that go through menopause, as just you just go through it,
Just go
right?
through
Like
it.
Yeah.
it's just accepted as, oh, you're supposed to feel this way, and it's just part of it. Versus well, no, why do I have to feel that way during that? Like, it shouldn't have to be that way. And that's, as I was doing the research and we were doing a lot of work on it, I was learning so much. And it really opened my eyes to think, wow, yeah, that's a different perspective of how that's just something that, for women, they're just kind of told, kind of just deal with it. Right.
Yeah.
But, so the series is great. So you can see it, it's on, our revoke.com. You can check it out. It's free. It's doing really, really well. And just excited about those things. We got other things in the works as well. Before that, we had a series on longevity, which is great. So I'm in the longevity space as well because it intertwines, right? Like, the mental health, as I said, connects with the physical health. And all of that plays into it, especially, as Black men, right? The number one killer is hypertension, which comes from stress, which comes from mental health, right? So all those things have an impact, and that's longevity. Like, so people are living longer now, but their quality of life may not be where it should be.
Yeah.
As they're living longer, right? People are taking more medication, right? Maybe they're not walking as well. So yes, we may be living to 85, but what is our quality of life
Right.
when we're getting that age? So that's a lot of work on the longevity series. So
what's next for Evan Whitehead? What are you building toward?
I think that, as I said, I'm excited about the website, like I talked about. Also, the book that's going to be coming out, as well. And, the other thing is I'm really looking to continue to scale my work, working with organizations, because the one thing that I learned is that it's great to help an individual, but, if you can help an organization change their mindset about what does work look like, what does the workspace look like, right? Then you can really impact on everything from productivity, right? Because when people are somewhere they want to work and they feel like being work, they come to work, right? They come to work, right? They're not calling in sick. They're not, avoiding work. They don't have all these things, when the environment is conducive and safe. So a lot of my trying to talk about, psychological and emotional safety, because, and from a learning perspective, an educator, right? We know that when children are safe, right, they are more likely to take risks, which also include making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But when young people don't feel safe, they're not going to take a risk, right? Because of what may happen.
Mm-hmm.
Adults are the same way. If you're in a toxic work environment where there's gotchas and you don't know, what's going to happen, and you just feel tense and nervous and you're anxious all the time, you're not going to want to be at your best and take those risks, in terms of thinking outside the box, being creative, doing things, for fear that, there may be punitive, consequences, for you just being you and being the creator that you can be.
You've been dropping jewels this whole entire time, man.
Episode, yes.
Like, and we're just soaking it all in.
I'm just a vessel, brothers.
Yeah.
I'm just a vessel. You know what I mean? I'm just a vessel. I appreciate it.
So let the people know, Evan, where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
For sure. Yep. So you can find me on Facebook, Evan Whitehead. Just go ahead and search that. You come up, you see, you'll see me on my profile. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find me in Evan Whitehead, creator and founder of the 3 Bs, Balance, Boundaries, and Breaks. You can find me on Instagram at Balance, Boundaries, and Breaks, at Balance, Boundaries, and Breaks. And then coming soon this weekend, you will be able to find me at www.balanceboundariesbreaks.com. And then every now and then I still pop into X and Twitter, and you can find me at Evan Whitehead 00.
Nice, man.
I'm J-Ack.
I'm Shah Kaur.
And this has been another dope conversation.
Peace and blessings, brother.
Yes, sir.